And I'm thanking you for knowing exactly what a pro wants, what a pro needs. Whatever makes me happy sets me free. It worked. I've infiltrated their operation. And now I can once and for all shut down this commercial. All it takes is one thing. The Mavericks winning in 5 games. It won't be easy, but it is necessary. I'm going to break down this series a little bit, give my predictions, but I want to start with this. There are 2 things that I'm not going to bring up over the course of this video. One is the same thing I said during the Clippers preview, where I don't really look at regular season matchups because so much changes from the start of the season to the end. Obviously, the Mavericks are a completely different team from the trade deadline onwards. These teams met 4 times. The Thunder beat the Mavericks 3. The Mavericks beat them once. Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving only played together once during those 4 games, and it was a 30-point blowout win for the Dallas Mavericks. But outside of like individual player performances in these matchups, I just don't take away a lot from regular season meetings. I just don't. And another thing I'm not going to mention, this gets talked about a lot. It's one of the things that people use against the Thunder. It's their age and inexperience. Now, it is true that typically young teams need some battle scars before they're able to really compete in the playoffs and make deep, deep, deep runs. And this Thunder team, the youngest team in the playoffs, the youngest 1 seed of all time. But I'm not going to use their age against them. They're very well coached. They have a play style that's very replicable in the playoffs. They have a legit top 5 MVP level candidate that can help, steady the ship if needed. And they don't, like when the Minnesota Timberwolves a few years ago or the Memphis Grizzlies a few years ago, you watched them play. They're young teams that are in the playoffs and exciting, but throughout the regular season, you saw signs that they were going to shoot themselves in the foot and embarrass themselves at times in the postseason. I haven't seen that from the Thunder. Like if at the end of this series we look at it and say, wow, the Thunder really beat themselves and shot themselves in the foot, that would shock me quite a bit. So let's talk about this series. My good friend Nick Angstad, who hosts the Locked On Mavs podcast, said something to me in a post-game show that really kind of stuck with me, that he thinks this series is going to be short, regardless of who wins. And I thought about it more, and I think he might be right, only because these 2 teams are so fundamentally different from one another. One plays isolation-heavy basketball that is very big and physical and dominant, and they want to out-physical you. The other is more of a finesse team who drives a bunch and uses a motion offense and is smaller but flies around defensively and concedes rebounds and concedes their size. So it does feel like whichever philosophy comes out on top might do it in a convincing fashion. I mentioned the size. That has the potential to be a real legitimate issue for the Oklahoma City Thunder in this series. The Thunder were one of the worst rebounding teams in the NBA this season and easily the worst rebounding team left in the postseason. The Mavericks from the trade deadline onwards were like a top 10 team when it came to rebounding. And I've heard people say that, this lack of size and this lack of rebounding is baked into the Thunder's scheme. And they're still a top 5 offense and still a top 5 defense. I've seen this story before. The 2022 Dallas Mavericks were a top 10 defense despite their lack of size and despite their porous rebounding. It was all kind of baked into the equation, and it finally came back to bite them in the ass in a major way against the Golden State Warriors, who just out-physicaled the shit out of them and out-rebounded the hell out of them, and it lost the series for them. I'm not saying that's what's going to happen here, but the lack of size is going to be an issue at some point for the Thunder. And you look at the 2 bigs for the Mavericks and what they did in this matchup over the course of the season. Derek Lively in 2 games against the Thunder this year, 12 points per game, 9 rebounds per game, 3.5 offensive rebounds per game. And Daniel Gafford in 2 games, 19 points per game, 12 rebounds per game, 5 offensive rebounds per game. Those 2 have to leave their mark and absolutely dominate physically. Because unfortunately for the Mavericks, Maxi Kleber will not be available at all in this series. And this scares me a bit for the Mavs. Like if they have to go small, if the Thunder spacing is causing too many problems for them, I don't know where they turn to. The Maxi small ball minutes were incredible in the series against the Clippers. And there were some concerns that Jonas Valanciunas was going to be too big for this Thunder team, and he was like damn near unplayable in that series. The Pels were 19 points per 100 possessions better when Jonas was off the floor and 24.8 points per 100 possessions better when Larry Nance was on the court as the small ball 5. The Pelicans starting lineup with Nance at the 5 instead of Jonas was +1 in a series where they got absolutely dominated, and the Mavs starting lineup with Maxi Kleber as the small ball 5 had a +47 net rating against the Clippers. So his absence is going to be felt. How heavily? I'm not sure. That's a big swing factor in this series. Because look, it's not a sure thing that Chet Holmgren's going to get dominated in this series like some people think because of the size. It's not a sure thing at all. In fact, I think Chet Holmgren is Far and away the biggest swing factor in this entire series, him mixed with Jalen Williams, J-Will. And Chet absolutely dominated the Pelican series defensively. I mean, he was an absolute menace. The Pelicans shot 45% at the rim when guarded by Chet. The Thunder had a 93 defensive rating when he was on the floor. He averaged nearly 3 blocks per game. So he's going to be a rim deterrence. The biggest thing for me is, will Chet offensively do enough to really punish the Mavericks for playing big? Will he be able to knock down open threes? Will he be able to attack mismatches and attack closeouts from the bigs? He shot 30% from 3 in the series against the Pelicans. He was 28% from 3 over the last 25 games of the season. Defensively, he's been good really all year, but there really was a rookie wall that it felt like Chet smashed into offensively towards the end of the season. And if Chet struggles from deep in this series or struggles offensively, I think the Mavericks are going to be able to impose their will with their bigs. Like, they're going to be able to get away with it. They're going to have somebody, at least at all times, that they're comfortable sagging off of or playing off of, which is not really a thing they had in the Clippers series when Zubats was off the floor. And for as good as Chet's been defensively, he doesn't provide the problems that Zubats provided the Mavericks early in that series, where it felt like Zubats was going to average 25 points per game and looked like Zubats Elizawan. So obviously the bigs are a big factor in this series. And again, I think Chet is the biggest factor in this series, because if he's knocking down threes and playing well offensively, the Thunder have a lot of things to throw at the Dallas Mavericks, and it's going to be difficult for the Mavericks to keep up offensively, especially if they're not knocking down shots. The Thunder shot 39% from 3 against the Pelicans. They shot 39% from 3 during the regular season. That was the 3rd best in the entire NBA. They are a great three-point shooting team. They generate a lot of great looks for their shooters. And the Mavericks, who attempt a lot of threes, have not been that great at shooting since they made their trades. They were 11th in the league from the trade deadline onwards in three-point shooting, and they only shot above league average twice in the 6-game series against the Clippers. They're going to have to hit threes. Now, the good news is for the Mavericks, they're going to generate a lot of their favorite looks, which is corner threes. Nobody in the NBA gives up more corner threes than the Oklahoma City Thunder. I think it's a product of them being small and having to help and overhelp. 14% of the Pelicans' shots in round 1 were corner threes. That was by far the highest in round 1. Yet they only made 22% of those shots. The Mavs shot more corner threes than anybody in the NBA this year. That number dipped a little bit after the trades, but it was still the 4th most in the league. The problem is, after the trade deadline, they only hit 33% of their corner threes, which was by far the worst in the NBA. Now, they were 42% on those corner threes against the Los Angeles Clippers, but this is also going to be a huge swing factor. The Mavericks are going to have to knock down threes. Guys like Dante Exum, who was kind of unplayable in the series against the Clippers, is going to get a lot of minutes in this series with Maxi Kleber out. He's going to have to knock down threes. He was 45% from the corner during the regular season. He was 0 for 3 against the Los Angeles Clippers. Those have to go. Josh Green, 40% from the corner this season, 27% in round 1. Those have to drop for him. PJ Washington, 23% from the corner this season. That's just an insane stat. 23% from the corner during the regular season. But hey, 41% in the playoffs. Playoff riser. We're going to need that from PJ Washington. And then you have Derrick Jones Jr., 56% from the corners in round 1. Tim Hardaway Jr., who's back and should be playing in this series, 40% from 3 in the corner during the regular season. The Mavericks are going to have to knock down these shots. It is imperative because the Thunder will hit their threes. Again, they generate great looks. They have a lot of great three-point shooters. Jalen Williams, J-Dub, is a good three-point shooter. They have Isaiah Joe off the bench who can knock him down. Cason Wallace can knock him down off the bench. Obviously, Chet Holmgren, when he's on, can knock him down. Lou Dort was nearly 40% from 3 in the regular season. And Josh Giddey, who everyone just leaves wide open, was 50% from 3 in the series against the Pelicans on 4.5 attempts per game. It's difficult for me to imagine the Mavericks mucking the game up enough for them to win games in this series despite shooting terribly from 3. So the 3 ball is going to have to drop for them because the Thunder do not play like the Clippers. The Clippers isolate more than anybody in the NBA, and the Thunder are good at isolating, but it's not really what they do. They drive. They put endless pressure on the rim. Now, this is, again, where the Mavs' size comes into play here. Nobody protected the rim better than the Dallas Mavericks in round 1, but they're going to have to stay connected defensively. They can't get beat backdoor. They can't fall asleep off ball. They're going to have to be locked in. And we know how good this Mavericks defense has been, but that's where teams give them trouble, is when they're moving the ball around and they're flying around and they have motion offenses. Think the Indiana Pacers. Those were 2 terrible defensive performances from the Mavericks. I don't think it's a coincidence that it was against a team that flies around and moves the ball. One thing that I think could play into the Mavericks' favor is that the Thunder's defense is really built on pressuring the ball and forcing turnovers. No team in the NBA forced more turnovers than the Oklahoma City Thunder this season. The Pelicans averaged 18 turnovers per game in the first round. That is the 4th most in any playoff series over the last 10 years. And the Thunder averaged 1.6 points per possession off of those steals. So the Mavericks are going to have to take care of the ball. They were great at it during the regular season. They had the 5th lowest turnover percentage, but it's been a sneaky problem for them. They've gotten a little careless with the ball at times over the past couple of months. That number dipped to 9th, the 9th lowest over the last month of the season. So it's imperative that the Mavericks take care of the ball, and I don't think the Thunder are going to be able to generate as many turnovers against this Mavericks offense led by Luka Doncic, who's also a big deal in this series. How healthy is he? I don't know. Obviously, he still put up really great counting stats, and he was a huge, I mean, the Mavericks dominated the minutes when Luka Doncic was on the floor against the Los Angeles Clippers, but he shot 23% from 3. Now, I've seen a lot of talks online about the Dortcher chamber and Lou Dort coming to lock up Luka Doncic, even though I think Luka Doncic has done pretty well against Lou Dort in his career. I do think that this is a better matchup for Luka than the Los Angeles Clippers, who I just think have more size to throw at Luka. He averaged 34, 11.5, and 13.5 assists per game against the Thunder this year. That is the most assists per game against any team this season, and I don't think it's a coincidence that the Thunder allow the most corner threes in the league, and Luka averaged nearly 14 assists per game against them. That's not a coincidence at all, because Luka loves doing that shit. And while I am concerned about his knee and how ready Luka is going to be, because there were times in the Clipper series, especially early on, where it did not look good. It did not look like the Luka we've grown used to. He looked much better in the final couple of games of the series. He had 10 assists or more in the last 3 games against the Clippers, and he was just getting to his spots much easier. It just felt like he had a little bit more bounce in his step. Now, he's going to have to shoot better than 23% from 3. Like, I don't think that's going to cut it in this series. Again, I think the Mavericks defense is legit. They are incredibly legit, and I think they're going to do a good job on the Thunder, and that's because I think they have the size to make life a little bit difficult for the drivers. I think they have the size to just disrupt Shai Gilgeous-Alexander just enough. They have that interior defense that can alter shots at the rim and prevent shots at the rim. But even then, I don't think 23% from 3 is going to cut it. I just don't. He's going to have to shoot better in this series. Of course, you have Kyrie Irving, who 20 points per game in the second half in round 1 against the Los Angeles Clippers. Who are the Thunder going to be throwing at him? And hopefully for the Mavericks, they don't need Kyrie eruptions in the second half to win games in this series. That's something that they have to be better at. Going into game 5 of the series against the Clippers, the Mavericks had a -40 net rating in the first quarter. A -40. The Thunder were the 3rd best first half team in the NBA this season, so you can't start slowly. You're going to dig yourself a hole. This Thunder team is too good. They're too well coached. They're too good in the clutch. This was the 8th best clutch team in the NBA over the past season. The Mavericks were 3rd by net rating and 2nd by winning percentage, so both of these teams are very clutch. I just don't think you're going to be able to dig yourself out of deep holes like you were in that Clippers series. Of course, the superstars are going to be huge factors in this series. Luka, Shai, Kyrie, J-Dub, who's entering that stratosphere. What is the hierarchy of players going to be at the end of this series? Is it going to be Luka 1 or Shai 1? Is it going to be Luka 1, Kyrie 2, or Luka 1, Kyrie 3? If that's the case, the Mavericks are going to win the series. If it's Shai 1, Luka 2, J-Dub 3, then the Mavericks are going to lose this series. I really don't know. I think game 1 and game 2 are going to be very, very telling. I don't think either team is going to feel very comfortable falling down 1-0 or even 2-0. Like, I don't know if this is going to be a series where a team claws out of a 2-0 deficit. It's possible, but just the way I'm gauging this series right now, it feels like we'll know kind of early how it's going to go. And as far as my pick, shooting has been very important in this postseason so far. The teams that shoot better from 3 have won pretty much every single game. But at the same time, I've seen size win out time and time and time and time and time again in the postseason. That's why the Mavericks made such a concerted effort to get bigger, because they've seen it themselves. And that's why I'm going Mavericks in 6. And I have to be brutally honest with you. If I knew that Luka was going to be 100% healthy and the knee wasn't a problem, I would feel very good about a Mavericks in 5 prediction. I just would. And all the discourse I see on Twitter are, you never watch our team because blah, blah, blah. You never watch our team because blah, blah, blah. This should be toxic, and I like that.